Just days ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's next trip to Europe, senior U.S. officials have renewed threats to pull U.S. troops out of Germany if Berlin fails to boost its defense spending. In June, Trump suggested moving the more than 30,000 soldiers stationed here to Poland. But would it really be that easy for the U.S. military to leave after decades of military presence here? Our reporter Fabian von der Mark went to Ramstein, the biggest U.S. base in Germany, where most locals want the Americans to stay.
A key American outpost in southwestern Germany. Ramstein Air Base. The biggest U.S. Air Force base abroad. Just what takes place there is kept secret, even 70 years after the base was founded. It is impossible to get any closer to the airbase. The entire compound is a high security zone, and we certainly weren't allowed to enter the base itself with a camera team. Instead, the US military gave us some of their own video footage from inside Ramstein. The US military shows how munitions and weapons are stored. Supplies for fighters in Syria, Mali or Afghanistan. Paratroopers practice jumping, fighter pilots set off from here on their missions to Africa, Asia and the Middle East. Defending Germany only plays a smaller role, according to this expert on the US.
Of
course, there's a bit of protection, but at the same time, the strategic importance of Ramstein for U.S. foreign policy and security policy must not be underestimated.
And it's not just the airbase. The biggest American military hospital outside continental United States is also nearby. Doctors and healthcare workers train here for emergencies and for working in a war zone. Wounded soldiers are brought here from all over the world. Soon they will be relocating, not to Poland, but closer to the airfield. A new hospital costing around $1 billion will be built, more modern and better equipped. Forest at the edge of the airbase has already been cleared. The mayor of Ramstein feels the large investment alone means there will be no move.
You never know what'll get used or not, but I can't see it happening.
The US has also invested a lot in modern warfare in recent years. The Air and Space Operations Center is located at the airbase. It's one of the US military's data hubs. It is now an open secret that Ramstein plays a central role in US drone strikes. Important information on targets are relayed to the US via Ramstein. Opponents of the base are unhappy about preparations for war being made in Germany. For them, a US withdrawal would be a reason to celebrate. But most people in Ramstein disagree. Germans and Americans have grown together over the decades, as seen at the German-American Friendship Fest. Among the guests are former and active members of the military who don't believe the airbase will be relocated.
Ramstein is a central point in Europe for the whole American forces. And not only in Europe, but Africa, Middle East, everything is centered around Ramstein. And that's why this place is going to stay here.
We don't need to leave, man. We're having a good time over here.
Look carefully at the airbase. More than 1,000 buildings, many of them underground. I know the place. For that reason, they can't move it all to Poland.
The Trump administration's threats to relocate are something people in Ramstein cannot imagine will ever happen. The joint location is too important for both Americans and Germans.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Simon Young, here. Simon, we just heard from some analysts and people in Ramstein saying that they don't believe that that the U.S. will be pulling its troops out of Germany anytime soon. But what about the political establishment here in Berlin? Do policymakers here take Trump's threat seriously?
Well, certainly Chancellor Merkel has said that she's not unduly concerned about this. She believes that American troops are here to stay. And politicians generally point out that, as we saw in that report, you know, the US is spending hundreds of millions every year to support the infrastructure that these troops need. Germany, by the way, also spends hundreds of millions on things related to the US military. And people say, you know, look, these suggestions that the US might pull back have been going on for decades, but places like Ramstein have continued to grow, not least because they're central to the defence not just of Europe but of the United States as well.
But does Trump have a point, though, with respect to Germany spending enough on its NATO defense budget? Is Germany really carrying its weight as one of the strongest, economically richest countries in NATO?
Well, in terms of spending, perhaps not, because there's a 2% target that NATO has. Germany's up to 1.36%, so there's still some way to go there. Germany doesn't like to get involved in combat missions. It's jaw, not war. And that's one of the arguments that's often made in this relation, because Germany says, you know, we put the emphasis on supporting civil society and preventing conflict in conflict regions, and Germany spends a lot of money there. Apart from that, in recent years, Germany has got involved in all sorts of overseas military operations. They're peacekeeping in Kosovo, they're training in Afghanistan, they're doing logistics in Mali, and they're also involved in the anti-IS coalition in Iraq and Syria, of course, alongside the United States.
And these foreign missions, we should remind ourselves, have only become possible since the end of the Cold War in the 1990s, politically in Germany. Now, the NATO 2% spending threshold, that's just one point of contention between Germany and the U.S. There are many others, so many that Trump has decided not to visit Germany on his upcoming trip to Europe.
Well, that's true. I'm not sure that that's a big problem. Trump did also say recently that he's very happy to come to Germany and looks to do that at some point. But as you say, there's a lot of tension between the two partners, particularly over the Iran nuclear deal. US has pulled out. Germany says it's still sticking to that plan to get Iran on side. There's also trade tensions, quite important, with Trump saying, you know, that that US companies are treated unfairly in Europe, while Angela Merkel says she wants a trade deal between the US and the EU as soon as possible. So there are these problems. Germany's also not signed up to the protection mission that the US is proposing in the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran has been threatening international ships. It's another example, really. Germany says we want de-escalation, we want diplomacy, and we're a bit worried that Donald Trump might drag us into some sort of conflict we don't want to be in.
Simon, thank you so much. Our political correspondent, Simon Young.